the Threnody Combined Fleet Academy, in geosynchronous orbit above the Coalition's third capital world, had been training fleet strategists for 140 years. Its core discipline was order of battle analysis, the study of how to correctly assess an opposing fleet's strength before committing to engagement. It was widely considered the single most important skill a fleet officer could carry, because most engagements in Coalition history had been decided not by the battle itself, but by the assessment made weeks or months before it. The Academy's graduation rate was 68%, and its case study library, built from 3 centuries of documented fleet actions across the Coalition's member species, was considered the most complete of its kind anywhere in Coalition space. Humanity had joined the Coalition 34 years earlier. In 22 years of eligibility, 3 humans had graduated from Threnody. The current class had 1. The Academy's library kept a single case study on permanent rotation in the first-year curriculum, a file so frequently cited it had its own shorthand among cadets, the Kess Corridor Assessment. It was taught, without exception, as the clearest cautionary example the Coalition had of a fleet count that was accurate, verified, and still catastrophically wrong. Cadet Ria Solikov was 23, from a shipyard colony on the edge of the Kess Corridor itself. Her admissions file had been reviewed twice by the Academy's placement board, because it listed her as the Certified Production Tracking Officer of Record during the Kess Corridor engagement, a role normally held by a fleet logistics veteran twice her age, listed against a service date that put her at 20 years old at the time. The board initially assumed a records error. Cross-referencing with 3 independent Coalition intelligence archives confirmed the assignment as genuine. Solikov had been posted, on an emergency basis, to track real-time hull commissioning at her home shipyard during the exact window the Kess Corridor case study covers, because the officer originally assigned to the post had been reassigned days before the engagement began, and no replacement had arrived in time. Solikov had not mentioned any of this to her cohort. She had arrived at the Academy, been assigned quarters near the strategy wing, and asked the registrar where she could access the Order of Battle Analysis reading list before term began. She wore a small stamped metal tag on a cord around her neck, the kind riveted to a hull's keel plate at the moment a ship is formally commissioned. Hers had come from the 9th vessel she had personally logged into service during the Kess Corridor build cycle. She did not mention the tag to anyone. She mentioned reading assignments, simulation schedules, and once, to a bored classmate, the fact that the Kess Corridor case study in the Academy's library still listed the human fleet's opening strength as its only strength figure. The challenge came during a seminar on the Kess Corridor assessment itself, in front of 10 cadets and instructor Kale M. Wren. Cadet Dorun Vash, 4th year, top of the class rankings in order of battle analysis for 3 consecutive terms, raised the case the way certain top-ranked cadets raise a favorite case, with the timing and tone of someone who has taught it to himself more thoroughly than the syllabus required, and wants the room to notice. "I've always found this case fascinating," Vash said, "purely as a study in decision-making under certainty. 60 ships, no capital-class hulls, confirmed by 3 separate sensor passes. I'd be genuinely curious to hear from Cadet Solikov, given her home region, why anyone believed 60 ships without a single capital hull represented a meaningful threat to a Havoc's battle group." Several cadets smiled. It was the particular kind of smile that circulates around a case study everyone already considers settled. Not unkind, simply the comfortable agreement of people who have never had to reconsider a number they were taught was final. Instructor M. Wren said nothing. He had pulled Solikov's deployment record in the 2nd week of term, after noticing the discrepancy between her admissions file and her posted age, and had been waiting since then for the syllabus to reach this exact case. "That's a fair thing to be curious about," Solikov said, in the tone of someone who genuinely found it a reasonable question. Are you asking about the count at the time it was taken, or the count when the Havoc's battle group actually arrived? Vash said the count was the count. 60 ships was 60 ships. 60 ships was accurate, Solikov said. That was the number 3 sensor passes confirmed, and it wasn't wrong. It was just 11 weeks old by the time anyone acted on it. By the time the Havoc's group reached the corridor, the number was 340, including 12 capital-class hulls that didn't exist when the count was taken. The smile stopped. Not all at once, the way a wave stops, the ones nearest the front first, then outward through the room, until the cadet closest to the door lowered the data slate he'd been idly annotating. Instructor Emren opened the production logs he had pulled in the second week of term, and put the first entry on the room's shared display without further comment. The first entry was the sensor pass itself, dated and time-stamped, showing exactly 60 human hulls at anchor in the Kess corridor shipyards, none rated above light cruiser class. It was, by every standard coalition metric, an accurate and complete count. Nothing about it was falsified or incomplete. It simply described a fleet that no longer existed by the time anyone made a decision based on it. The second entry was the shipyard's commissioning log from the following 6 weeks, showing new hulls entering service at a rate the Academy's own textbook listed as statistically improbable to sustain. A rate that, in fact, had been sustained continuously, because the shipyard had simply kept every slipway running around the clock, rather than treating peacetime production caps as fixed. The third entry was a resource allocation record from a civilian orbital fabrication plant 2 systems away, showing its retooling from consumer hull plating to warship-grade armor within 9 days of a regional advisory notice. With no central directive ordering the specific conversion, the plant's own management had made the call independently, based on public shipping lane risk reports, and notified the fleet afterward. The fourth entry was the arrival log of the Havoc's battle group itself, cross-referenced against the human fleet's actual strength on that date. 340 vessels, 12 of them capital class, none of which had existed on the date of the original sensor pass. The engagement that followed had lasted 11 minutes. By the third entry, Vash was not smiling. He was watching the display with the expression of someone doing a calculation that was going to take longer than the seminar period to finish, and possibly longer than the case study had ever been taught to acknowledge. Instructor Emren put up a fifth entry, and then a sixth, 2 additional engagements from coalition history, unrelated to Kess corridor, each following the identical shape. An accurate early count, a production curve the assessing side had never modeled, and a battle group that arrived to find a fleet 3 to 5 times larger than the number they had planned around. The room was silent through the fifth entry and the sixth. Nobody asked Solikov a question during that stretch, and she did not offer to answer one. She watched the display along with everyone else, in the manner of someone confirming a thing she had tracked in real time 3 years earlier, and had simply been waiting for the room to catch up to since. The cadet near the door finally set his data slate down without writing anything further on it. Vash stopped at the door on his way out, after the seminar had technically already ended, and most of the room had filed past him. The count wasn't wrong, he said, not quite to Solikov and not quite to the room. It just stopped being true faster than anyone accounted for. Solikov said that was the part the textbook never quite says, and that most people only noticed it once. She closed her hand briefly around the small stamped keel tag hanging at her collar, the one riveted to the 9th hull she had personally logged into service during those 6 weeks, and gathered the rest of her materials without hurrying. Instructor Emren waited until the room had emptied before he opened Solikov's term evaluation file. He looked at the production logs on his own display a moment longer than was strictly necessary, the way a person looks at a number they had already suspected, but had never seen laid out so plainly before.